Welcome back. Creating Dementia Solutions is our program. Richard Pyatt here. Thanks for being with us. It's a show on Access Vision. We're glad you found us. And it's also a podcast. Make sure you follow Miles for Memories on Facebook so that you know when these episodes come available there as well. You know, we made a commitment at the beginning of 2024 to look at things from the perspective of the caregiver of someone who might be living with dementia or Alzheimer's. And today we're going to talk a little bit about recognizing the early signs of dementia and how to do that. Connie Skidmore is back with us, volunteer with Miles for Memories, to help us sort through all of that. Hi, Connie.
Hi, how you doing?
Great. Thanks for being here again. We appreciate that so much. You know, it is a little bit difficult perhaps for a loved one to recognize these signs and then say, okay, that's something different than typical aging. How do we process those? And so this is part of our conversation today, is trying to understand when we should pay particular attention. And I think that's really the focus here. And part of that, of course, is memory loss, right?
Part of it is definitely memory loss. And one of the reasons I think it's difficult to recognize some of these things is because a good many of the signs associated with Alzheimer's and other dementias are things that we do now and then anyway. I mean, we all forget things.
Sure.
We lose things. We misplace our keys. We don't. Why did we come into this room? How many times do you say that?
Right.
The thing to help recognize that this is a problem is when it becomes more constant, when they're constantly forgetting or losing, or and the other thing that everybody's familiar with, I think, is the repeating the same stories or questions over and over and over again.
Sure.
We kind of consider that to be one of the first signs of dementia, even though it may not be the first warning sign that we get. It's just that it's so prevalent that we hear it all the time. And excuse me, I'm sorry, that we just kind of ignore it until that becomes so annoying that you can't leave it alone anymore.
Sure.
You have to do something about it.
I don't know if this is true for everyone, but I feel as though in my experience there's a threshold that gets crossed and I started to recognize it more. I think that's what you're alluding to, right? The repetition of certain things.
Yeah.
Is that true? Was that true for you?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Not exactly the same as with my grandmother, especially, was like that.
Sure.
Bill was not so much.
Yeah.
But my grandmother would hound you about things.
I see.
Why are we doing this? And 10 minutes later, why are we doing this? And,
Yeah. Sure. So it has a different feel than what you described a moment ago. Why did I come in this room?
Yeah.
It does feel different, doesn't it?
Well, and the thing that's different with them is that they can't ever come up with an answer to those things. We do, eventually. You stand there and think, okay, wait a minute, I came in here because, or, okay, now I know what I did with my keys, that kind of thing. But with the Alzheimer's patient, that never seems to come to them.
Okay.
So,
And then another sign might be challenges in planning or problem solving.
yes, absolutely. A lot of dementia patients have a problem with numbers, which means they might screw up the textbook or their checkbook kind of thing. They double book their appointments. They tell someone they'll be someplace at some time and then tell somebody else they'll be someplace else. And again, almost everything that we'll talk about here are things that everybody goes through at some time or another, once in a while. The biggest problem for those with dementia is that they don't know how to fix it. They don't know where to look. They can't tell the difference between a teaspoon or a tablespoon, and just different things like that. They just don't know how to do that, and that leads to another one, which is a difficulty in completing familiar tasks. My grandmother was always an excellent baker. And she one day decided when she was making cookies that she would taste the vanilla, and it didn't taste good. So she just started leaving that out of anything. She could not be talked into the fact that it doesn't taste good until you put it in something else. But they also mix up things like frying baking. Those things can become dangerous.
Well, that is an example that I think we can relate to, right? The notion that it might have been a recipe that someone carried out over and over again successfully, and now there's a challenge.
Wow. That was certainly the challenge with Grandma's cookies, because her cookies were famous throughout the family right up until they weren't.
And then there was a difference.
And then there was a difference, yes.
So familiar tasks, that's right.
Exactly.
These are things that went off without hitches in the past, and now it's different.
Yes. We used to go to all of the football and basketball and hockey games and things at Michigan State, and basketball was my husband's favorite. And then suddenly he wasn't remembering the rules right, kind of thing. That's just
Something he knew well.
something he knew well, something he knew very, very well, and it was very disturbing. And it's bad in so many ways, because first of all, he had to give up something that he loved doing.
Sure.
Just there was no way to do it. But on that same note, people forget the card games that they used to play all the time, go out for a walk and then can't remember whether they turned right or left and can't find their way home, or for a drive to the grocery store that they took daily, kind of things. They're just familiar places and familiar things and familiar people. They forget names too. Those are the things that you just, as the caregiver, I think, have to realize are really happening more and more and more.
Yeah. And you mentioned place. There's also some confusion potentially with time.
Yes, yes. Is it time for breakfast or dinner? No, I already had breakfast. Well, no. But, yeah. Hearing that they have an appointment with the doctor next week, they'll ask you continually, is this the day I'm going to the doctor? Is it time for me to get ready to go to the doctor? Is it not?
Or maybe it's some other appointment or engagement
Yes.
that they
Any of those things. They just confusing. They can't remember sometimes how they got to where they are, even in the doctor's office, and it's all of a sudden it's like, why am I here?
Sure.
Even though they've been asking to go for a week. But
In those examples, it sounds like progress has moved
yes,
beyond that threshold that we're talking about
Exactly.
initially, where it feels a little different, the repetition, et cetera. Now we've moved beyond that a bit more, haven't we?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Another thing too, before we get too far into some of these things, I think is that, like I had said in the beginning, we forget ourselves these things from time to time,
Sure.
and it's knowing when they're a problem, when you can't get back to them. But it just seems like everything out there has another solution. I mean, maybe you're not forgetting things so much as you are taking the wrong medication. So one of the things we have to remember is that it may not be dementia or Alzheimer. It may be something else that's coming your way. So that's why we have to keep track of how often this is happening and what it takes to get them back on the right track, if we can get them back on the right track. So first of all, go to the doctor.
Yeah, right, and try to understand.
Right.
Trouble with visual images and spatial relationships.
Problems with reading, and understanding what they're reading. Determining colors. I had heard someplace that if they have a problem with color, it's like they can't tell blue from green, that kind of thing. Those things are kind of important if your loved one is still driving.
Yes.
And the lights change and that sort of thing.
Wow.
And distances. They can't tell how close they are to something or how far away they are to something, for that matter. So even walking downstairs or off a curb or something like that, it can be a little hazardous.
Okay. Here's something that we all do. We talked about things that we all do. Trouble with words when speaking or writing.
Yes.
The word doesn't come to you. That happens to all of us.
And someone's name, someone you know well, that is just gone. It's there was a lady that I knew at one time who used to use a specific word whenever she couldn't come up with a word that she wanted. So she might pick up her coffee cup and say, "Is this my sandwich?" Or anything that was just I mean, it's just a word that she used to replace everything that she couldn't, because if the word didn't come to her, sandwich did.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. They stop in the middle of a sentence and can't figure out how to continue where they were going with it, or what even they were headed for.
That's interesting that you sorted out that example. So there is an attempt,
Yes.
very often, to try to proceed, even though that word isn't there, or,
Right.
or whatever the challenge might be.
And sometimes it would, like with my grandmother, it would sometimes change the whole conversation that you were having
Sure.
in the middle, because she'd lose track of what she was saying, and she'd sit there for a minute, and then she'd start thinking that's where she left off, but we're now talking about something totally different.
Else.
Yes.
Well, a few more things. Losing or misplacing things certainly is something we might expect.
Yes. And again, this is one of these things we all do. I mean, I walk around looking for my glasses, and half the time they're on the top of my head. But it's just knowing that you can eventually come up with what you need, that you just, oh yeah, that's what I always do with them. But they don't
Yeah.
ever come up with that.
Here's something that needs a little defining, I suppose. Poor judgment. What does that mean, Connie?
You know, we get these telephone calls all the time from someone who wants to sell us something, or get information from us. They'll ask us for social security numbers and things like that. Dementia patients don't understand scam.
Okay.
They just think that this person needs this information, and the same is true with Reader's Digest thing comes in the mail, and they think, okay, if I buy this, I'm going to win a prize. They think sometimes when a bill comes that they need to pay it, and maybe they do, but maybe they also already have.
Don't remember doing it.
Don't remember doing it. Yeah, it's difficult to. It's not a real common thing, but well, yeah, it probably is. Also, is a matter of poor judgment, is the fact that they don't pay close attention to good grooming and that kind of thing, and that does fall in the same kind of a line.
So all of these are potential signs. So you put these things together,
Right.
and a caregiver can add up maybe the totality of it, and it is more impactful in
Right.
the decision making about what's happening.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. If they tend to withdraw sometimes too, because they sometimes know that there's something going on here that isn't right, and it's easier for them to just not do it then. So they forego social obligations. And,
Yeah, unsure of themselves.
and my husband had friends who used to pick him up and take him for coffee, and he stopped going because I think he couldn't follow the conversation that they were having, and he couldn't contribute to it, and he knew that much. That's the good news, bad news, I guess.
Right.
Because it kept him from seeing some people he would like to have seen, but he just felt uncomfortable with the way he reacted to them.
And that's unfortunate, because sometimes that interaction is good.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. We need to do that.
And finally, the idea that a mood or personality may change in a person.
Well, and that, I think, is what I just said about Bill not
Yeah.
wanting to do this thing. It changed his mood. It changed his personality. It got to the point where he just wasn't comfortable with the things that he always loved the most. He loved going to coffee with his friends. He loved traveling. He loved taking photographs and things. And all of those things just became impossible for him when he developed 2 rolls of film and they were all blurry. And that sort of thing. So, but as we started to say in the very beginning, all of these things can happen to all of us at any time. But when they begin to mount up, then you know that there's something that needs to be looked into.
The totality of all of these things and the frequency, as you pointed out,
Right.
could be indicators. And that's the idea with this conversation, is to help a caregiver evaluate and think about it. And Connie, we appreciate your helping us do that, and the sharing that you've done from your own personal experiences. Thank you. Connie Skidmore, volunteer with Miles for Memories here on Creating Dementia Solutions. Invite you to look at the Miles for Memories website. We've talked about this on previous episodes, and we invite you to find those and listen to them. Technology. It's important. Help home. Take a look at that on the Miles for Memories website and place your order if you think that can be helpful. I'm Richard Pyatt. Thanks for being with us.